In a world where it's hard to find real, authentic stories, we're here to share the true heart of the trucking industry and the soul of country music. We dive into life on the road and capture the essence of small town America. From the brotherhood of truckers to behind the scenes at NASCAR.
We're the last of the cowboys to giddy up gone boys. 18 wheels on the concrete, it's a slow and down breed, rolling like Jesse James.
We're going to make storytelling, industry insight, and musical highlights. This is the Road Show with Tony Justice and Friends, brought to you by our friends at Fitzgerald Truck Parts. Y'all come on, let's take a ride. When you're out here on the big road, putting in the miles, you sure don't have time to be waiting on parts, much less overpay for them. Fitzgerald's Truck Parts is your go-to for quality parts and fast service when you don't have time to wait. Knowledgeable people, fair prices, and no BS. So truck it up on over to FitzgeraldTruckParts.com and use code Tony at checkout for 10% off your order. This is just for my listeners. Fitzgerald Truck Parts. They're here to keep you moving forward. Hey everybody, welcome to today's Road Show with Tony Justice and Friends. We're delighted to have East Tennessee's very own Brack Terry. He's a powerhouse attorney. He's been standing up for hardworking folks for over 30 years. He's everything from representing truckers and the big trucking accidents to, taking on corporate giants. Brack's fought for peoples whose lives have changed in the blink of an eye. And he's done so with grit, a genuine passion, and a whole lot of care. So we're going to dig into where that fight comes from, what truckers can do to protect themselves, and why the law's about people just as much as it is about justice. So welcome to the show, Brack. How you doing today, buddy?
Hey, Tony, doing great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be on here.
Yeah, man, it's always good to hang out with you and get to talk for a few minutes. Both of us being from East Tennessee, we've not just one town apart from each other, so we've had a chance to do some pretty cool stuff together. And you've actually represented my mom on a case and done an amazing job for her and helped her out. So, growing up in East Tennessee, Brack, you've been fighting for folks, and in East Tennessee for almost 3 decades. Growing up here in East Tennessee and the way you were raised. How has those roots shaped, the way you are today and the way you practice law?
Tony, I grew up in Bulls Gap. For all you guys out there running up and down 81 right off the Bulls Gap exit was Volunteer Speedway. My parents owned that. That's where I spent a lot of my early years growing up, running around up there. I had an old Subaru that I got to drive around up there. But yeah, so I started practicing law about 30 years ago, and we've been representing people here in our family firm for 30 years. Learned practicing law from my dad, who started here back in 1960, and been doing it ever since.
Well, that's cool. I know you all have a very highly respected brand here in this area, and I know also you all have partners, across the country as well. A lot of people think, well, they're out of East Tennessee, they must just represent people in East Tennessee, but you actually are a team of lawyers that have partnered across the U.S. and you're actually helping several other different states. Is that correct?
Yeah, Tony, we've been real fortunate. When I first started practicing, of course, I did stuff more locally. It wasn't long after that we got into doing more and more cases that involved other states and jurisdictions, and so now we pretty much practice all over the place. This year we just resolved a case in North Carolina. We did one in Texas that we resolved last year. Earlier this year I resolved one out in Colorado, and so we pretty much go all over the place.
Well, you've handled some really big truck accident cases. A lot of our listeners out there run hard every day. So from your side of the table, what's one thing truckers can do to best protect themselves legally, while they're out there on the road? What's some of that advice that you would give, especially, truckers? Most of our crowd's truckers, and we seem like we have a big target on our back. Everywhere we look, we see signs, if you've been hit by a big truck, call this number. I seen one time up in Pennsylvania that said, have you been scared by a big truck? It said, call this number. And there was 3 of us. We were running together, and I was running the front door, and I'm like, did I read that right? So I hollered back at the third truck. I said, did I read that sign right? It said, if you've been scared by a trucker, to call this number. He said, yeah, that's what it said. I said, did you happen to get that number? I said, because I've scared the crap out of myself about 3 times a day. I might can make some, I might can make some money, but yeah, what's some of the advice you'd give, when it comes to trucking life and the law, and how we as drivers can best protect ourselves to, if we're in that unthinkable situation of being in an accident, we can be best protected and have our, put our best foot forward if we ever have to, take something like this on.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll say, Tony, to kind of address what you said, lawyers are like truck drivers in some ways. There's some truck drivers you wouldn't let drive your truck. I got some lawyers I wouldn't let handle the cases we handle either. So we can't control what all those lawyers out there do, but you know, as truck drivers, the thing that strikes me is you guys are on the road more than anybody else. You log more miles, and just statistically, because of that, you are more susceptible or more likely statistically to be in an accident, whether it's your fault or somebody else's fault. And it's just a function of the number of miles that you guys drive. And so most of our cases over the years have been, or a whole lot of our cases have been, for truck drivers that have been hit either by another truck or by a passenger vehicle. Now, used to, when we first started practicing, all the trucks had big uninsured motorist policies. So if you got hit by a passenger car that caused a major injury and really injured a truck driver, there was always plenty of coverage. Well, in today's world, the insurance carriers have kind of changed that around. They still write the $1 million policy or more that most trucks have for liability, but they don't have a policy for the drivers themselves. So most of the time, if it's a truck driver that gets hurt by a passenger vehicle, we're a lot of times sitting there looking at, where's the insurance? We need some more insurance. So the one thing I would tell everybody out there, if you're driving your truck, you need to make sure you got a good uninsured motorist policy. If you're driving for a fleet, you probably don't. And so you can just see your local insurance agent and say, hey, look, I'm driving all the time. I need a policy that's going to cover me if I get hit by a drunk driver or a drunk driver causes a bad wreck out there. So that's one of the things. The other thing too is a lot of times people get pushed to make a load or get somewhere on time and things like that. And it's that's the thing that we commonly see, that causes accidents. And a lot of times it's a company pushing a driver to make a deadline or something like that. And I just encourage people, it's you drive a truck, it's a way of life, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure you're home, for your family and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I hear a lot of that, where drivers are pushed, it's like, man, you guys just got to have a backbone. I mean, at the end of the day, you are the driver, you're the captain of that ship. You fall asleep out there because you're trying to please some dispatcher and you run over somebody, you're going to be the pilot. You're going to be the pilot of that ship. You're the one going to be blamed, and all the heat's going to come down on. So, you got to have some backbone. And, if they want that load at 3 o'clock today, they'll really want it at 5 o'clock today. If you need to stop, take a nap. Take a nap. I don't care if it messes up your logbook or what it does, because once you've had that accident, you can't back up and fix that. You can't back up and make that go away. There's other things you can do with a load to get things worked out to where everybody's happy at the end of the day. They get what they need, and you've done your job safely. It's got to be the key motivating factor is, safety, number one. And there's so much truth to that. So another thing that was kind of, on my mind is, we was talking about a little bit before we went on here, is what do you see that the government's trying to do, to kind of help, the insurance rates, they're getting higher and higher for drivers and for companies. There's so many lawsuits. I mean, we just had Carol Fulmer, a trucking company, I think well over 50 years in the business, closed its doors because of lawsuits and the freight rates right now being as low as they are. And there's so many lawsuits coming against truckers, and it's crazy. And I know it's driving the rates up. And do you see anything going on, on the regulation side, that'll, kind of help suppress that a little bit? And
So I think that's a two part answer. There are things going on in the world and laws getting passed that help protect truck drivers and truck companies. For instance, in Tennessee, they recently passed a non-economic damage cap. So the most someone can get for non-economic damages, which is pain and suffering and that type of thing, is $750,000. And the other thing that happens too, you see these big verdicts that happen, and those get a lot of news. Okay, what you don't see is that a lot of those verdicts get reduced on appeal. I don't know. There was a huge verdict not too long ago that they got reduced down. It was like a $20-30 million verdict, but on appeal, it got reduced down to like $2 million. So you see that kind of stuff, or you don't see that kind of stuff that happens. But the non-economic damage cap's a big thing because it affects two ways. One, it protects truck companies, protects insurance companies, protects truck drivers. It doesn't protect a truck driver if they get in a real bad accident and they can't work anymore, they can't drive anymore, then they're feeling the brunt of that.
And that's where the secondary insurance could come in, that like you were talking about earlier. I mean, so you're talking about, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought I'll ask you, I forget. So, we can go out, like I could go to my regular insurer. I'm insured through a Farm Bureau here in East Tennessee. And so I did my pickup truck, and merchandise trailer, and my wife's car. And I can add a policy to, for uninsured motorists if I'm receiving injuries from an uninsured motorist while in my big truck. Even though my big truck isn't on their insurance plan, it's a personal coverage thing. So is there other insurance that we can get, for, like you're talking here, there's a cap, $750,000 cap, but maybe the truck driver got paralyzed. He can't work anymore. And there's not a lot of money to go around because that's capped, so is there secondary insurances also that we can get outside of that uninsured motorist policy with our insurances, instead of relying on the company?
So not really. I mean, there's, workers' comp coverage and things like that really doesn't pay very well. And so the uninsured motorist policy is the best thing you can have. Now, the cap of $750,000 doesn't apply to economic damages. So lost wages, things like that are not affected. And it's state to state. So if you have a wreck in Tennessee, your Tennessee laws apply. You have a wreck in North Carolina laws apply. And they've all got every state has various different parts to their law that's helpful and hurtful in different ways. But, I think the biggest thing is like an umbrella policy, like you would buy on your truck, might be as little for you as the driver only, might be as little as $200 or $300, maybe $400 for a $1 million or $2 million policy of uninsured motorists. And that really just protects you if you get hit by that drunk driver, or you get hit by, somebody that's just not paying attention and they don't have coverage there.
I got you. Well, listen, we're going to take a short break and give a shout out to our sponsors. Let them tell us about their awesome products and services. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure you hit the like button, leave a comment. We love hearing from you guys. Share this with your friends, and we'll be back in a few minutes. We'll see you then. To all my brothers and sisters of the highway, if you're tired of wrestling with those tangled air lines and your power cord that run from your semi-truck and connect to your trailer, then Easy Claw's got you covered. Not only does the Easy Claw system keep your lines and hoses organized, but it also keeps them from dragging and chafing, thus preventing breakdowns, expensive repairs, DOT fines, or even worse, being shut down by our good buddies down there at the Chicken Coop. So let's be less stressed, safer, and compliant, y'all, by checking out my friends at EasyClaw.com. For over 20 years, my buddy Clifton with Crossroads Towing and Truck Repair has proudly served the trucking industry with reliable, family-owned service. Available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to get you moving again, safe and sound. Just call 270-773-4000 and tell them Tony sent you. Hey, everybody. You know, Diesel Pride believes the best way to respect all of us American truckers is to showcase everyday road trucks on their shirts. I love mine. Visit dieselpride.rocks for the best trucker apparel. Tell them I sent you. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Road Show. Hanging out with my buddy Brack Terry from Morristown, Tennessee, over at the Terry Law Firm. Talking about, lawsuits and things drivers can do to protect themselves. Brack, I've seen you, you've stood up and fought for a lot of drivers in many cases in this area. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of people these days in the industry, a lot of drivers that are being hired that because of the necessity or of companies, looking to fill seats. I grew up, and there's a lot of drivers out there that grew up around trucks. Our dads drove, that we greased them, we helped work on them, we understand the trucks, we started moving them around. We were 12, old enough to push the clutch in, and dad started teaching us things. And so, when we become truck drivers, we kind of fall into that with a lot more knowledge, understanding what we're doing. But then, you get a lot of these bigger companies, trucking companies out there that had just run you through least amount of training as possible, and they're putting people in the seats of these trucks, and they're just not ready. I mean, I know there's, I think, some instances to where if you've got 3 months experience driving, that you could start training somebody else. And I'm like, you hadn't even begun to learn, about it, much less to start training someone. So, you run into those cases where, we get involved in an accident with another truck because they've hired a driver that has no business behind the wheel of that truck. I know you've represented some cases where you had to go, after that other trucking company. And so what's some of those biggest cases, bigger cases that you've worked on? And, tell us a little bit about that, because I know there's a fine line between representing drivers and then, going after companies when you have to.
Yeah, Tony. So what you're saying is exactly right. I mean, a lot of our cases are for truck drivers that have been injured by other truck drivers, and it happens a lot. What you're saying is absolutely correct. I mean, in the some of the biggest cases we have had, you so often see drivers that are inexperienced or not your traditional truck drivers, just like you were saying, not that person that grew up around trucks and and learned about them from a young age, but somebody that's just totally new to truck driving. And what we see is happening is there's a supply and demand issue. There's really good truck drivers are sometimes in short supply, and there's a demand for truck drivers. And so from what we see, I think you're exactly right. I think you see drivers that are fairly inexperienced getting in trucks that may not have been trained all that well. That can be a recipe for disaster sometimes. That can happen. One of the biggest cases we've done in the recent past involved somebody that was still training. And you get into language issues and things like that sometimes, but what people understand and don't understand, but that can happen a lot. The drivers that are not that experienced, for sure.
Yeah, we see a lot of it out there, and going in and out of shippers and receivers, and there's, you're in there with other drivers, and there's a language barrier there between the shipping, the company that's shipping the product, and they're trying to communicate with the driver. And I mean, they have trouble even getting their paperwork done because they can't speak English, So turn that into them. They're sitting in the truck, and you assume that if they can't speak it, they probably can't read it, I would imagine. So, I know we got GPSs, and you can change the language on GPSs where they can, they can get their directions. But how what's translating the, caution, construction ahead beside the sign being orange? What warns that driver that it's the left lane that's closed? If it's an orange construction sign, okay, they may slow down because it's an orange sign, but it says left lane closed. Well, they're not going to know that's the left lane closed if they can't read until they get up there. We see it all the time. You're sitting in the lane that's not closed. It's backed up in there, and this lane's just flying right on by you. 4-wheelers, big trucks. You're like, what's wrong with these people? That the stuff back there, that sign said the lane was closed. So yeah, it's an issue. And I know it gets political when it comes to the American language, and it should never get political. It's strictly about highway safety. You had that big accident out in Colorado here a few years back where the driver in that flatbed come off the mountain there and coming into Denver, and he toasted his brakes. He didn't have no brakes, and and he killed all those people. And you had 2 or 3 places you could have, hit the sand pit. And, they said that, he couldn't read those signs. He was inexperienced. He wasn't very, really, really familiar with the English language. And when you're sitting down there and you say, oh, well, they have a right, to come over here and work. Well, you got to put yourself in, what if that was your family is sitting at the bottom of that hill and they got completely run over by a truck, out of control truck running 90 miles. I don't know how fast that guy was going. There was film before he crashed going past cars in the emergency lane. I mean, he was getting it. I mean, he's 80 plus mile an hour. But imagine that's your kids in the back seat that truck hits. So it's about safety. It's not about anybody being mean or racist. It's just, and it's, we're getting more and more traffic, so much traffic volume on the interstates anymore. It's the America's population since me and you were running around 19, 20 years old between then and now. It's probably quadrupled. I remember jumping on the interstate here at 417 on I-40 and go to Knoxville at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and it was you just go. It was 2 lanes on both sides and no issues. Now 3 o'clock in the morning, there was nobody out there. Just you and a few other some trucks trucking up and down the road. And now it's pretty busy even at night. So a lot of things have changed, and there's a lot of things that need to be looked at, and I'm glad to see some of the policies getting put in place to help make. I'm always for things that make sense and make the industry safer. So well, listen, so you're in a position to where you're around folks who many times have been devastated. I mean, their life went from perfectly normal one day to the next day their world's completely torn apart. And that's how fast it happens too. I mean, I don't think people realize sometimes we get pretty comfortable with what we do, and we don't stop to realize, you go from a beautiful sunshiny day 1 second to devastation the next, and it's crazy how how dangerous our jobs are as drivers, and how fast the tides can turn. So I know you had to work with some people going through some really hard times, and you've seen folks at their lowest. What's something that you've learned about resilience and hope that sticks with you from some of those people that they turn to really help them through that, and how much of a road do you take in trying to help them with that? Because I know you're very personal, and you bring a level of genuine care to your clients to try to not only help them financially but support them morally.
Yeah. So, we pride ourselves saying we're a family law firm, and doesn't just mean that it's me and my sister and my family here working at the firm. It means we really want to treat all of our clients like their family. And that's at the end of the case, that's our goal, is to know that if you ask a client, they'll say, yeah, they treated me like I was family. And I think for people, you do see these devastating, unfortunately, that's a lot of what we do is people that have had their lives changed. Maybe they don't work anymore because of the wreck. Maybe they're confined to home because of the wreck, or worse, we do death cases. But, I think the thing for most people is, the people that stick out to me that do the best in the situation are people that just try to maintain a positive attitude. People that wake up every day and go, this is bad. What has happened to me is bad, but I'm gonna get through it, and I'm gonna get up and do the best I can every day. And we try to encourage that with our clients. And I think another big thing is making sure people get the right medical treatment and things like that they need, because sometimes if you're just going to, you may not, if you're working and you have a workers' comp physician referring you around, well, they're going to send you to what they think is right, but maybe not the best. And so, we want to, that's one of the roles we think we play, is trying to help people when they need it, which is not all the time, but when they need it, direct them to, the type of doctor they need to be seeing, or encourage them to go back to their family doctor to get to the right folks.
We was talking yesterday, and to touch on that again, what you're talking about, I've been in some situations, and one thing that I can just on a personal note can bring up that really helps in those kind of situations is just a good, strong faith in the man upstairs too. He gets us through a lot of things. And that's something I would highly recommend for people, to do, because he's there for us when we need him. I guarantee you that. But we was talking yesterday about the new technology and how much information that it's gathering on a driver's performance and different situations, over braking and speeding and things like that. Can you touch on that for some of these drivers that's in these company trucks that are newer trucks, that's equipped with this type of software, and it's crazy to me. It blows my mind hearing you talk about. I'm in an '06 Peterbilt, so it's we don't have a lot of that stuff, and I've never had to deal with that. So what's some of the new technology going on? How does it benefit drivers, and how does it hurt them?
So first thing, I'm not an expert in the technologies and how they work. I just see what they do from my side of the fence, and it gives me a little bit of an understanding of them. But the biggest players we see are maybe Samsara, Lytx, Lytx, I think is how you say it. And you'll find those technologies are one similar to those in most fleet programs. And they are most, big truck companies will have one version of that or another. And Tony, what those things record is absolutely amazing, and what triggers them. It'll tell it'll record your hard braking, your if you swerve to the left or to the right, or your speed, and they formulate, it's kind of AI based, I believe, but they formulate a driver safety profile for the driver based on the parameters the company selects. If for instance, if a driver's doing something that is programmed in there to be reckless at 3 a.m, well, the safety director may get a alert on his phone with a screenshot of the video saying he needs to call the driver. But what those new systems do is absolutely, I mean, the amount of information they record is absolutely amazing. Now, I think it can be good and bad. Sometimes I think it takes things out of context as far as what it shows. And, but the great thing for safe drivers is, it's generally going to show, what happened and how it happened. We've had a number of cases that we've turned down just because we can look at the video and go, look, driver's doing nothing wrong here. This is somebody else's fault. It's a great safety feature for good drivers. The flip side is it's very telling for a bad driver. And, the reason companies are using it is because they can make a determination as to, I mean, I know, I can't remember which one it is, but it actually gives the company a percentage predictability that this driver is going to be in or cause a wreck. It'll say, based on what all the drivers have done over the last year, there's this percentage that the driver's going to be in a wreck.
I'd love to see some of that data from some of these mega companies that's hiring these guys that aren't really prepared to be out there. I'd love to see some of that data.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be pretty mind blowing. But well, listen, we're going to take another short break. Give a shout out to our sponsors, and we appreciate everybody tuning in, guys. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. As always, you got any questions? We'll go back if you watch us on YouTube and leave a comment, question. We'll be more glad to address that. We love to hear you guys. Love to have you interact, and hit the like button, share this out. We sure would appreciate it. And we'll be back just in a few minutes. Too many drivers are being hurt on the job. That's why the OnLift system by my friends over at Patriot Lift is a total game changer. It's 100% operated by air. You just hit a button and you're dropping or hooking your trailer in a matter of seconds. No more straining on that crank handle. No more injuries and no more missed work. Maybe you run a fleet of trucks, and so you're looking at potentially saving thousands of dollars on workman's comp and injury claims. Listen up. Right now, you can get your OnLift system by Patriot Lift for $900 off the regular price by using discount code TJ2025. Take care of your body and your rig and get yourself an OnLift by Patriot Lift. And hey, it's made right here in the good old USA. My good friend Jay and his team at Pride Truck Wash know that truck drivers are the heartbeat of America and its economy. At Pride Truck Wash, their mission is to help those hardworking people do their job in a clean truck. Stop in at a Pride Truck Wash and experience the difference. To learn more, visit pridetruckwash.com You guys know that I've trusted House products for years, and so should you. For me, it's Diesel Treat for winter, Diesel Lifeline for emergencies, their Diesel Defender for warm weather, and House Multi-Purpose for just about everything else. Visit House products today. As truckers, we drive more miles than anyone else on the highway. As a result, we're at a higher risk of being involved in an accident. If you've been hurt in a wreck, let my good friends at Terry Law Firm help. They know trucks and how to handle truck wreck cases. Reach out to the Terry Law Firm on the web at terry-lawfirm.com. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Road Show with Tony Justice and friends. I'm hanging out with my good buddy Brack Terry with Terry Law Firm out of Morristown, Tennessee. Me and Terry's been knowing each other a long time, and really good guy. Lawyers get this reputation like truckers sometimes, and you're definitely one of the good ones. And I know you genuinely care about your clients and things. But with that being said, is there a story that you could share about a case that really stuck with you? One where it wasn't just about the verdict or the dollar amount, but about changing someone's life, and helping out. I think folks would love to hear how the law can be about more than just paperwork. It can be about the people.
I can tell you stories about cases and about how cases have, changed people's life till you got tired of hearing them. But one that sticks out to me is, kind of a funny story talking about truck companies and truck drivers. And usually when we do depositions, they're aligned at the hip, they're not separating at all. We had this case down in Texas, and we deposed the driver. It was an oil rig case. We deposed the driver, and the driver, he said my brakes failed. And that's what caused me to run into the rear of this thing, caused like a 4 or 5 car pile up down there, and was kind of unusual because nothing in the accident report said anything about the brakes failed. So we turned around, we took the deposition of the owner of the company next, and he was like, he immediately said, I don't know. He said, I checked the brakes were fine. Brakes didn't fail. I mean, he just came right out and said it. Said, look, there wasn't a problem with the brakes. He had to not be paying attention. But the interesting thing, the thing about that case is, one, that the truck company driver, and he was small, he probably had 4 or 5 trucks. The case settled shortly after that, as you can imagine. But my client was a truck driver, 2 truck drivers actually. And really, I heard one of them say after the case was over, hey, this has changed my life because I can retire now. I can't work anymore. I couldn't continue to drive because I just couldn't sit in the truck that long. But because of this case and what you've done, I've been able to retire and I don't have to drive every day now. And, it's a case because of who the gentleman was. I always remember him. And the facts of that deposition were, kind of amazing because normally you don't see that, where one says one thing, one says another. But yeah, it touching thing for that family.
Yeah, I'm sure, man, it makes you feel good when that's all said and done, and knowing that you was able to help someone that's deserving, of having some, getting some money so they can get through the rest of their life. If they're not able to work. I mean, I said these could be life altering experiences, and I know, knowing you personally, you hope nobody ever has to call you with an event like this, but unfortunately these events happen, and if people, do need a lawyer, I highly recommend you to anybody that I talk to going through a situation. Don't think twice about it. But so what's the timeline like? So if you're involved in an accident, you're injured, these guys, you go through the process of the accident report and all that, and you get back home, and so you realize you need a lawyer. You get the lawyer, you give them the information they need, and once that ball starts rolling, can you kind of, in a nutshell, put like, what kind of timeline are you looking at before you see a settlement? What's that driver gonna, what does he need to be expecting to go through as far as depositions, mediations, and things like that? What's that timeline? What's that process look like?
So first thing, it does depend a little bit on the lawyer. Not, trucks, as you all know, are way different than passenger cars. So many things different, from the federal motor carrier regs, to all the rules you got to go by and all the safety training y'all have. So you need a lawyer that's familiar with truck cases. Whether it's me or somebody else, you got to have somebody that knows nose truck cases. Timeline is real dependent on the injuries. If you have an injury that you recover from in 3 or 4 months, and or at least you get to the point where you're at what they say is maximum medical improvement, then the timeline can move a lot quicker. But some people have injuries that you know it, they may not have surgery for 6 or 8 or 9 months because the doctor's trying to do what he can to avoid surgery. So a lot of it depends on the facts of the case, and the goal is always for us to resolve the case for a client as quickly as possible. But we don't want to do it so quick that it costs money. So we want to do it as quickly as possible, but with an eye to where we can make the best recovery we can for the client. Sometimes when I'm talking to clients and they ask me that same question, I say, hey, the one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to settle your case today and find out tomorrow you got to have surgery next week, because that would be bad. And so, but so it's really hard to say, and it is really injury dependent. A lot of cases get settled. We have a 1 year statute of limitations in Tennessee. A lot of cases get settled before that. Some stretch beyond that. And the other thing I'd tell you is remember, each state is different. So if you're in Alabama, for instance, there's a longer statute of limitations than Tennessee. I think Virginia's 2 years, but every state has a different statute of limitations. That's the one thing you got to be really careful about.
Well, for anybody out there listening, Terry, I know you, and I hope that they never have to, call you or call another lawyer. But if they are involved in in a situation where they need a lawyer and they're interested in talking to you, what's that process? Can people call and get just kind of talk about their case at first with you a little bit at no charge? Where do they get a hold of you? What's the best way? And are you on, what's your social medias and things like that if people want to follow along and,
Sure,
if
sure.
what you got going
So,
on?
we're smaller, we're smaller, and we think that's the best way to do it because we can manage who the lawyers are here and who you talk to. And if you call us, somebody, me or somebody that's in my family is probably going to answer the phone and talk to you. I don't care where you've been hurt at. If you need somebody, call us and we'll make sure either we help you or we'll get you to somebody that can help you. But yeah, easy to reach out to us. Just give us a call. Our number is 423-586-5800. Our website is terry-lawfirm.com. Can email me at brack@terry-lawfirm.com, or or you can go to the website and there's things you can fill out there and somebody will get back to you. But if you just, unlike a lot of these places, you just want to give us a call, there's going to be a live person answer the phone and we're going to get you to somebody that can help you.
So do y'all do free consultations if people want to call
Oh yeah.
in?
Yep. So our practice is strictly contingency fee based. So we only get paid if you get something. And we're going to tell you, right off the bat, whether or not we think we can help you. So we can't help everybody. There's some cases that just aren't right for us, but we also, if we can't help you, we'll tell you, or try to tell you somebody that can help you.
Terry, you're also, outside of being a lawyer, you got a lot of other hobbies. You're a big music fan. I know your son is in music and, starting his career off. And so don't be surprised if you guys don't see Brack at one of these truck shows.
That's right.
We will try to get him down there at Large Cars and Guitars, or, y'all can meet him in person, shake his hand, and to get some more information about him and what he does, and just kind of get to know him a little bit. So hopefully we'll have you down there at Bristol Motor Speedway in 2026. And, some folks can meet you and say howdy.
Love to do it. Love you guys. And, so over the years, some of my favorite clients, some of the guys that stick out to me the most are truck drivers that we've represented. And, I always enjoy my truck driver clients, always great guys.
There's never any lack of colorful characters when you're dealing with truckers. I'll tell you that.
And absolutely.
Well, I tell you what, we appreciate you, representing drivers and and trying to have our backs out there. We don't have enough people to do that. We're grateful for that. Just from me personally, thank you for all your hard work and your family's hard work. And man, I appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate all the information that you've helped put out there. I think we probably clarified a lot of questions people had on their minds, and maybe here another couple seasons go by, we can have you on again.
Thank you, Tony, man. I enjoyed it. Good to see you, and appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thank all you guys for tuning in for another episode of The Road Show with Tony Justice and friends. We can't do none of this without God and you all. And you're very well, very much appreciated. Thanks again and for tuning in. Till I see you again, as always, God bless and speed safely. Hey guys, thanks for tuning into The Road Show with Tony Justice and friends, brought to you by our great friends over at Fitzgerald's Truck Park. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Also, follow us on my social media for more updates and behind-the-scenes content. Until next time, God bless, and as always, speed safely.